Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to the Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. We're ready to get things underway. Thanks so much. If you're somebody right now who is joining the show right off the bat, just want to say big shout out to you for being here. And if you've come here expecting to hear about the latest and greatest with Michigan football, you have come to the right place. We're going to get right to it when it comes down to the Maize and Blue. And what I'm thinking about, got to get a mood check and where everyone's at. I mean, there's Michigan's second from last game, penultimate game coming up here in the regular season. And people are getting antsy at this and that, and it's exciting. And not everybody was on the same page. I'll tell you what kind of mood I'm in with Michigan as they get ready to travel to the East Coast and take on Maryland. And we do have a basketball game tonight. Dusty May and company, a big favorite at home in a 6:30 tip. We'll talk about what's going on with Michigan on the hardwood. But, of course, we're going to start with the game coming up on Saturday. And it's not a noon start, not a 3:30 start, a 4 o'clock start. I'm not sure how I feel about a 4 o'clock start. So, who cares how I feel about it? That's when it's going to be kicked, but it's a little weird, but you got to be ready. You got to be ready. Even as someone that watches the games, you got to be ready for Michigan to play in a baseball field at night, at noon, at 3:30, at 4 o'clock. And that's when it's expected to go off on the Big Ten Network. Michigan, a 13.5 point favorite. I don't know. Does it seem a little low? Or based on what you've seen from Michigan, maybe that's way too many. Jake Butt's going to be on the call. So as the color analyst, that's always good when you see Jake up there. Jake always providing some special insight when it comes down to Michigan. And for this one, when you just take a look at it, I know a lot of people say, well, this is a trap game. Every game, for as long as I've ever watched Michigan, they've always played Ohio State the very last game. So the second from last game always is a little bit of a trap because you do have the Buckeyes waiting the following week, and it's tough. It's tough for the players. Look at all the fans. I mean, the fans are all over the place. They don't know what to do. They don't know about talking about this game, talking about Ohio State, talking about the playoffs. They're all over the map with it. But if we were all sitting around in a production meeting and say, well, what's at stake here? For Michigan, what's at stake is keeping their playoff hopes alive and setting up a great week with a win in the anticipation and the possibility of beating Ohio State 5 times in a row and being able to get into the college football playoff. That's enough. I don't need to tell you that. I mean, that's pretty awesome, that part. But, you have Maryland. They, just like Michigan, have a true freshman quarterback and all of the ups and downs that go with that. I was looking at their schedule. And can I put that up there? Can we do that? Okay, we can. All right, let's do it. So make that a little bit bigger if I can. The non-conference slate for Mike Loxley's team, they went 3-0 against FAU, Dusty May's team, old team, Northern Illinois, and Towson. I did not know that Towson had a football program. I just learned that now, looking at the schedule. Then I can remember people, Michigan fans, saying that Maryland game is going to be the tough one. As you look through Michigan's schedule early on. They beat Wisconsin on the road 27-10. That's a good win. And then they they did not beat Washington, but they kept it close with Washington. They also kept it close with Nebraska. So those three games, a win on the road right after that, because you didn't know about Wisconsin, thinking that's pretty good. That was kind of the beginning of Wisconsin's face plant. But then staying close, both of those games were Maryland home games, and they lost to the Huskies by 4 and to Nebraska by 3. And that's the end of the good news for Maryland. Because after that, they lose to UCLA. Of course, they lost to IU. Then they got beat by 15 against Rutgers. And no shame losing at Illinois 24-6, but that gets us all the way to where we are at right now. Military Appreciation Day, College Park, Maryland, at SCCU Stadium. I don't know what that means. Probably a bank, credit union, but Military Appreciation Day coming up for the Terps. Should Michigan win this game? Well, that's what it's all about. We're sitting here, and that's what gets me to the other part where it's the mood. And the mood that I'm in is I'm in a pretty good mood. I'm in a pretty good mood. Now, after that USC loss, I remember thinking, will Michigan be able to run the table and set up a situation where they could play Ohio State to get into the college football playoff? I wasn't thinking for sure, oh yeah, they're just going to make mincemeat of all these. They're just going to run roughshod through the schedule that they had in front of them. But they have done that up to this point, but it hasn't been a real thing of beauty. And what I have seen from Michigan fans, you always have the super Michigan fans who never say anything, but they're just, everything's great. And then you get the other ones that are on the other side where they're just never happy about anything. You get that with a big time program. We know that, but there has been a lot of angst about Michigan that people are questioning how much they have improved since game one. People are questioning why they commit so many penalties, why so many turnovers. Is that a reflection of the coach? And what about the coach? A lot of people after last game saying, "Oh, Sharon is not the man." I mean, already saying that he's not, saying that that they're questioning whether he's going to be able to get it done. And that's where I think you force yourself in wherever you're at. And where I am at is I am going to have to see, I'm going to have to see this game, of course, and I'll let you know in 2 weeks, where I sit, but I don't think it's almost no matter what happens over these next 2 weeks. If I was a, $50 million donor, or if I was Ward Manuel, or if I was a season ticket holder, I would not want to move on from Sharon Moore, even if this thing falls off a cliff. Now, those are famous last words. I'm going to remind myself about that. But the reasons that I would not want to do that is because there's a lot of good things with Sharon Moore. And the things that I look at where, the penalties and the turnovers and some of the game management stuff, whether it's timeouts that you question, I question, or procedure, the process of replay and those things. He is a young coach. He's not 40 years old yet. And he is in his second year. I do believe that, he can improve. And there are a hell of a lot of things that he does really well. The team loves him. That's not a small thing. the team really likes playing for him, loves playing for him. He appears to be a great recruiter. And where Michigan's at with their NIL and with their transfer portal, this is another thing that's not a small thing. A lot of people just think, oh, the money's always there and everything. He's in tune with all of that. And he's a good spokesman for the program, and he presents Michigan in the kind of way that I think that people like. Again, those are not small things, and those are the things that I would put on the column of that he has going for him that I like. And on the other side, I think there's things that he can improve. But the big thing is that the team overall, and sometimes I don't know if I bristle, but when I hear Michigan fans that are just like, I guess I call them slappies, because immediately, if there's any criticism, they're just like, this is the youngest team in the Big Ten. What's wrong with you? I don't know. Ohio State's the fifth youngest team in the Big Ten. Is that a huge gap? So yeah, they have a lot of young players, but specifically, they have a true freshman quarterback. That's the one, if we're going to zero in on it. And along the way, they have brought some outstanding freshmen with this young team that are very promising. Andrew Marsh would be the next. You talk about Underwood. We talk about him all the time, nonstop. We're talking about Marsh and how he has burst onto the scene over the last month and looks like, he's an incredible wide receiver and that he could be one of the special pass catchers ever at Michigan. Well, that's not a small thing to say, but I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. That's pretty big time. And you also look at some of the other skill, from Jordan Marshall to Hyder, who they have coming in next year. Those are big things. I remember when 2020 happened, and it was not irresponsible or a hot take to say that if you were Ward Manuel, that you could move on from Jim Harbaugh. He could have easily done that, and he shouldn't have received too much criticism like, what? That's a preposterous move. No, he could have. I think a lot of people would have moved on from Jim Harbaugh. To Ward's credit, he didn't, and the rest is history. But there's two things that stand out when that whole, people love, the whole drama part about it. If the Bears would have not made the playoffs, I think they beat the Saints in their final week, the Bears would have contacted Jim Harbaugh, and I believe they would have hired him, and Harbaugh would have gone. That's one thing. I believe that. I know there's a lot of people that that don't believe that, and the Harbaugh's, all this stuff. Okay, that's just my opinion. And the other thing is that Jim Harbaugh in his recruiting class had J.J. McCarthy sitting right there. I happen to feel that if Harbaugh did not have J.J. McCarthy committed to Michigan and he had some, ho-hum, 3-star or something, some kind of 4-star that, the Michigan could pull in any day of the week, I think Ward may have moved on. I think, Ward had a ledger of, okay, here are all the good things. Michigan man, he NFL experience, Grand Slam hire. If he can't beat Ohio State, no one else can. Oh, 5-star quarterback. That might have been the deal breaker for that. So it gets me back to Sharon and how things are going. This is a must win on Saturday for Michigan. And before, you can flip out when people say must win. Must win for what? Well, must win for them to set up the week where they could then have everything for themselves at stake against Ohio State. And it might sound funny for you to hear this, but if Michigan would win the game next week against Ohio State, that would be a bigger win in Michigan history than last year's win on the road with no quarterback. And the reason, you could try to argue that one, and you could probably come up with a lot of good points, but the biggest reason would be that Michigan's playing for something. Last year, they were playing for pride. And boy, they had a hell of a lot of it. And they came up with one of the most surprising, one of the great wins in their history. But this year, if they win on Saturday, must win, they put themselves in position where they could get into the college football playoff and have a great season. They're playing for something. Playing for something is a big deal. Now, when it goes south and you're eliminated from things, you still have to pick up the pieces and find something to play for. A bowl, a New Year's Day bowl, used to be what do they call it? A Big Six, or was it a Big 12? Whatever it was, those were big things. But nowadays, it's about getting into the college football playoff. So that's why it's a must win. It's also a must win for Sharon, who, has all of these people, there's some good points and some good points on each side of, I don't really like him. Oh, I really like him. But if he wins on Saturday, the things that you really like about him, setting up the Ohio State game, and let's just say that they, play their ass off in that game and maybe lose. I think that you step away and you say, hey, you know what? The best is yet to come. Certainly next year, the expectations will be ratcheted up, and, in his third year, it's always, things are always accelerating. But when you look at the roster and where the position is at, if they would go 9-3, even though you don't like to consider that right now, and we have to play the game on Saturday first, it really wouldn't be all that bad. Or it would be where you would have promise to the future. If you lose the game on Saturday, it really sucks the life out of the greatest rivalry ever. No, you still get up and, you still, what's that? Is it a meme of the girl where she's standing in the corner and she's crying, but she's like, go. But, that's how you feel. You would still go there. It's still the great rivalry. But nobody would then be standing around, man, like, this is great. What a week. Oh, I can't wait. The anticipation, where it would just be out of sight. I mean, it's either going to be out of sight anticipation for the game next week if they get a win, or it's just all going to be sapped and you're going to be trying to pick up the pieces. And then meanwhile, all those people that are grumbling and fighting about whether they think Sharon is the right man for the job, boy, they're going to have a lot more material on their hands. So that's why it's a must win. It's a must win for my sanity. People will be flipping out, and I think it's just it'll all feel like it's in flames for the next couple of weeks, 2 weeks, if they drop this game on Saturday. So that's what's at stake. That's my mood. I like when there's a lot on the line, and there still is. So there's a lot to look forward to on Saturday. And getting the victory, it's a must win. I see a lot of folks. Well, I'm sorry, I don't see a lot of folks. I see at least a narrative about, Michigan shouldn't play anybody in the non-conference. Just think, if they played Bowling Green or Oklahoma State instead of Oklahoma, they would have won that game and they would essentially be in the playoffs. And the thing for me, that's a pretty big deal. I'm not going to get too wrapped up in the college football playoff rankings or bracket until next week. Then I'm going to start getting wrapped up in it, because if Michigan wins their must-win game, then it becomes very interesting. Then it'll be interesting to what everyone else says. Now, from me taking a look at it, and I try to be balanced and fair, but if Michigan wins this must-win game and then they beat Ohio State, Michigan at 2 losses will have the best win of any of those other 2 lost teams. And they're Michigan. That does carry some weight, but they will have beaten no one else on their resume will have what Michigan has. And the 2 losses aren't that shabby when, you're monitoring it and taking a look through it a little bit. Oh, yeah, look at number 8, Oklahoma. They're in there. I don't think anybody's going to get beat them up too much with one of their losses against SC. It wasn't against, Northwestern. But you know what? If they had played like a lot of people, hope, or just using the theoretical, if they would have played at Oklahoma State and they'd be sitting here with just one loss, and then if they lost to Ohio State, I don't know, and I know we would still be comparing those other 2 lost teams, but I don't know how good I would feel about arguing for Michigan if they had lost to Ohio State and then lost to USC, and they had a victory with now Bowling Green in their back pocket instead of a loss to Oklahoma. I would be thinking I might understand how the committee could be like, or Heather Dinich might be talking about, yeah, Michigan just doesn't have that SOS. They don't have it. It's one of the reasons I like playing there's a lot of reasons, but I know this is a story for we could sit around for a couple hours talking about. Let's play it real easy like everyone else or a lot of other teams. Not everyone else, because there are plenty of teams that play tough non-conference, even in the Big Ten. Even the team that they're going to play in a week from Saturday, they play pretty tough games. So, that's that when it comes down to it. So that's how I'm feeling about it. And then, the thing is, you can play that game because what if they would have played Bowling Green, but what if they had to play Oregon or Indiana this year? It wasn't a real loaded Big Ten slate for them. I thought it was nice, manageable, and they played a tough one in the non-conference. I liked it. But if we are going to play what if they would have just played Oklahoma State instead of Oklahoma? They could be in. Yeah, but, maybe not when it comes down to there. So I'm not going to get worked up about the committee. I saw a couple. Let me see if I get this right. The Oregon was getting credit for beating Penn State because at the time, Penn State was pretty good. But on the same token, they were looking at another team. I forget who it is. Maybe Miami. They were like, yeah, those teams aren't any good anymore, so we're not giving them as much credit. That's what the actual committee, I saw the committee chairman or anything. I only glanced at some of it, just scrolling through. And you can't get too wrapped up in that committee. And what you realize and what you should know as a fan is that the committee can do whatever they want, and that's pretty much what they do. So if you're like, yeah, but this week they did this, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, and they're eating and drinking and just sitting around and laughing at everyone, because they're just going to do whatever they want. So, but I think my main takeaway is that if of this particular segment is that if Michigan beats Ohio State a week from Saturday, it'll be a more impressive victory, provided they win this must-win game, than it was last year. And last year was one of the great ones. So that's where I'm sitting. That's how I'm thinking about things right now. It's always great to take feedback from the people and see how everyone else is digesting things or processing things, probably the better way to say it, right? And for that, you could be out there and say, I don't know what to ask. I don't know what's on my mind. It would be something. Do you think that? What do you like about Michigan's chances if Jordan Marshall can't go on Saturday? And to me, that 13.5 point line suggests that they think that Jordan Marshall is going to play. I would be dropping it into single digits if I worked at one of those. Might not be a bad place to work. If I worked at a gambling center, any of these that did the lines, and I saw that Marshall was out, I would say, drop it. Drop the line. Not that Michigan can't win the game, but I would not. I feel on a confidence level of Michigan winning on Saturday, kind of feeling like, I don't know, 8.5 out of 10. That's pretty strong feeling. 85%. If Marshall's not there, 70%. That's a pretty big drop. That's how I'm feeling. Only 3 o'clock down our way. Not dark yet. That's from Paul. Where you at, Paul? Over in England? I mean, I don't know. It's, I get it. Mr. Martini talking about the spread. He doesn't think that they'll cover. Yeah. Yeah, no, based on how they have been playing these close games, and I thought that I picked Northwestern with the points, but not by 2 points. I thought Michigan was going to win by 9, and what the line was 10 or 10.5. Toby's talking betting. He says, I think they win by 3 or a touchdown, finish 9-3, and go to a decent bowl. I would be content with that. Toby, that's very reasonable. Very reasonable. Finishing 9-3 and going to a good bowl game, not too shabby. I'm with you on that. Of course, you want more. I would not take that presented to me right now. Here's 9-3. Do you take it? And I'm going to say no, because I think they should win this game on Saturday. This must win. And then I don't ever want to just concede the game to OSU. So I'm not taking Toby's very reasonable feedback of being content with 9-3, and yet I completely understand it. Michigan Go Blue 1234 says he still doesn't understand how we're not blowing out Purdue and the Northwesterns of the world. This team has way too much talent to be in dogfights with 5-5 and 2-8 teams. I'm going to look right at the quarterback, and I'm going to say that the quarterback who they wanted to work on the passing game against Michigan State, and he didn't have it. And so they just went to smash. And then they had Purdue, and they're like, hey, we're going to work on the passing game. And then he was turning the ball over and didn't have it. And then against Northwestern, I think they were like, let's just, we just have to, which I agreed with. Let him, take the training wheels off, however you want to put it, put more on his plate. And then we saw it. We saw the Bryce Underwood of the future he was dealing. But with that came a lot of mistakes. And maybe that's why they were reining him in, and that's why they were being cautious with him. That's why. That's why they didn't blow out Purdue and Northwestern. I mean, it's easy why they didn't blow out Northwestern. They committed 5 freaking turnovers. And they were turning it over against Purdue as well. That's why. Gregory. Michigan loses and the luster will come off the game. No doubt. No doubt. There is going to be a nice luster, which I've never put those words together before. But the luster with a loss on Saturday is stripped. You are so right about that, Greg. Good way to put it. If we beat Ohio State, Moore will be seen as one of the greatest coaches we've had. Yeah, well, so that's kind of how football goes. In some ways, it seems silly to say, wow, you're going to base things on 2 games here. And then in Ohio State, yes. And I'm going to agree with the sentiment if we're playing the theoretical game. If Moore wins these next 2 games, this will have been a great season. And I don't like to use great. A lot of times I get away from it by saying, oh, it'll be a tremendous season, a special season. But it will have been a great season. You might only reserve great for winning championships. Well, you've only had 2 great seasons, or a Big Ten championship. I guess then you could put a lot of great seasons in there. However, you have to define great yourself. I'll define great by winning these next 2 games. And if Moore is able to do that, I'll fight. Not, I mean, there's some people I wouldn't mind fighting, but you get a little bit older. I think, after you get how old? I shouldn't be trying to, challenge people to fights, but I'll be ready to fight online with anybody that would, not think that it was a great season if they won the next two. Paul, who's enjoying the daylight, says there has to be a learning curve for a head coach, and based on wins, he is trending up. Yeah, as we sit here right now, he's in a good position. And we all want to rush to the end. I've gone through the hypotheticals of a win and a loss this week and a win and a loss the following week. I've done that myself. But as we sit here right now, sure, there's some criticisms. And they're going to go way up, or then he's going to put himself in a great position, one or the other, with this must-win game. MGO Blue 1234 doesn't join every show and doesn't send, multiple feedbacks all the time. But today he's got a lot on his mind. And he follows up with saying he thinks the fact that Moore was part of Harbaugh's culture for so long gives me confidence that he is the right guy. Yes, I think that's a nice part of Sharon Moore. That if you like Harbaugh, and Harbaugh handpicked Sharon and actually coronated Sharon in 2023 after he won those 3 games where Harbaugh was suspended, and declared Sharon Moore the ultimate Michigan man by being able to win those 3 games. That was a pretty big deal. And he was marvelous in those 3 games. One of those was that at Maryland in 2023? Woo! That was in a pretty intense game. For as much as Michigan went on and won the championship and everything, and the defense came up really big there in that game, if memory serves. But it was kind of a shootout. It was kind of unlike the Michigan. That's why you're just chalking this one up. Remember 2023, but then of course Penn State and then OSU. How he managed the game and how he was going for it a lot on 4th down. He doesn't do that as much anymore. He might say, "Yeah, I had Trevor Keegan and Zach Zinner and Blake Corum. That's why I was doing it." Good afternoon, Flint Truth. Rico, I want a new coach if he doesn't make a playoff in 2026. Now, that's one of those kind of sentences where you have to talk it through a little bit. If I understand what you're saying, if I'm let's fast forward to next year and say Michigan doesn't make the playoff. I think there's going to be a lot of people that'll be in your camp. Meanwhile, 3 years, no playoffs. I mean, you got to make the playoffs. Playoffs? You got to make the playoff. But, there's a lot of things that could go into not making it. And I'm not here to, make the case or try to make the hypothetical of some of the things where you might still want to stay with them. But I'll make a quick one. What if Underwood, steps, he looks like the Heisman candidate through, a half dozen games or something, and then just, slips in the bathtub and he's out for 4 or 5 games or something, and then he comes back and he's looking pretty good and everything, but, they don't make the playoff. It'd be something like that, right? Bryce and Caleb seem somewhat similar in their development. Are we talking about Caleb Williams? I don't know. I thought that Caleb wasn't he super good when he was a freshman, and then he wasn't all that hot. I mean, at Oklahoma, is that so? He was at Oklahoma when he was a freshman, right? I think that's who you're talking about. I guess I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember how Caleb looked at Oklahoma, but in his first year at USC, he was great, and then he won the Heisman. Yeah, I've looked at a lot of quarterbacks. Yesterday, I was looking at how did Matt Stafford do as a freshman at Georgia? Not all that hot. It was something like 13 touchdowns, 7 picks. I was looking at Peyton Manning. Bryce has been he's been up and down. He has not been as good as I thought, but it was hard not to have sky high expectations since he was declared the greatest ever by everyone that's ever watched him. So it was really hard. And then himself, you've never seen anyone like me. There's never been anyone ranked as high as me. I'm going to win 2 Heismans, so it was hard. Michigan Mark is in today. He says the head coaching job at Michigan is worth $11 million if you don't get elite for half off. Do they really look better than the 5-5 team last year? Coin flip in 3 games makes us 8-2 versus 5-5. Do they really look better than last year? And I saw and a lot of you saw it. You're a Michigan fan. Joel Klatt was on his podcast, and I think it was what was he doing? Scolding some Michigan fans, like, you guys can't look everything. This is basically a paraphrase. If you didn't hear, Klatt was scolding Michigan fans that you can't look at everything through the 2023 lens. This is, and then he was like, they're way better than last year. I don't like the offense is way better than last year. Last year was the worst ever. I don't like that part. And I'd say, if I was going to nitpick some of the things that Joel had to say, Joel was talking about the reverse to Marsh that they fumbled on, that Michigan got cute. They didn't cute. They ran a reverse and they fumbled. Klatt, and then you get a lot of that when you're the color analyst, but I don't know. That one in particular to me, jumped out. No, Joel, they weren't getting cute. They just ran a reverse. Reverse isn't cute. You should fumble it. I guess we all, do a little better reactionary, but he deserved a little. I think he called his greatest game. He was no 2023 Joel Klatt. He might have been sitting in his caddy too long or something over there, enjoying that game last. I don't know. I like Joel Klatt. I'm knocking him a little bit, but hey, there's the difference. A lot of times, thin line between doing a good job and then feeling like, and look at all the Michigan fans out there, Mark. There's a lot of them that are kind of fed up with the position that Michigan's in right now. I don't think there's a reason to be fed up. Some criticisms. There you go, Rico. Rico's a pretty level-headed. New Year's 6 is what it's called. Thanks, Doug. I forgot what I was calling it. Special 6. No, I don't remember what I couldn't think of it. I think you could be really only disappointed with 9-3 if you were delusional to begin with. Well, I think that so they get the win this week. That's what this is. 9-3. We're talking about losing to OSU. Can they how they play against OSU? What if they play a barn burner fourth quarter and lose? Then I'm right with you. They get their clocks cleaned. Could you be a little disappointed with 9-3? Here's the theoretical where you could be real disappointed with 9-3. They come out and have some kind of game like they've had these last 3 or 4, where you think they should beat Maryland handy, but it's a slog fest. It's ugly. You might even feel like they're lucky to win. And then they go out and OSU just comes in and, gives it to them. I think overall what you're saying is correct. I guess I'm trying to, I'm just nitpicking here. If it plays out like I just said, then it's going to take a minute, for the majority of people to get excited about the bowl game and be excited about next year that way. Is this true? I'm going to read this one real slow to everyone. The same people complaining about Sharon are the same people who complain about Harbaugh. They don't change. We need Oregon to cream USC. I'll take a dub, but yeah, I'm looking at some of that. Rico, a little feedback back and forth here because Rico said people had perfectly good reasons to complain about some of the Harbaugh years. I think there's some of that. Yeah. I mean, Harbaugh's first 2 years, then he plateaued, and then it was the last games against OSU, the last games that he lost. I think the last 2 where they 62 points. Don Brown gave him 55 points. I can remember going down and asking Don Brown about changing some things up. And he said, I'm going to get more aggressive. And I was like, I walked out of that. So they're not a very good approach, Don. And yeah, Jim Harbaugh was like saying, he just said, Don Brown is the greatest assistant coach I've ever worked with. I complained about that. The real fan stuck with Harbaugh. I never wanted him gone ever. Yeah, that's fine that you never wanted him gone. But when you say the real fan stuck with Harbaugh, you could be a real fan and thought it was time to move on from Harbaugh. There were plenty of people. That's fine that that you stuck up for him and it worked out for you. That was a great move. Great move by everybody that stuck with him and said, hey, he'll get us through whatever else. I'm standing by him to the bitter end. But after 2020, to me, it was reasonable to move on from him. It was reasonable as a fan to say, hey, you loved him as a player. It was a Grand Slam hire, but it's not working out. And you endorsed going out for another coach. It didn't mean you were a bad fan at all. That wasn't a mouth breathing, sports talk or message board crazy. That was very reasonable. So let's not twist it out. There are plenty of real fans that thought, hey, it's time. This thing isn't working out. Now that's it. Michigan's schedule prepared them for these last 2. I hope that's what you're talking about. DVR is talking about OSU not playing anyone. Better late than never. Ripping for last call. It's not really the last call. It's good to see you there, Rip Star. James Franklin going to Burger King Tech. I had a friend who was a Hokies fan. His name was Will. And he was from Blacksburg. And what was Will's last name? I can't remember. It's been such a long time. But there was never anyone that I've ever met that was more Southern than old Will. And he would talk about Blacksburg, and it was like another world. I mean, it is deep. I know it's not in really the deep South, but man, James Franklin's going to go in there. I wonder if he's going to come up and do anything like old Brian Keeley. Why family is something. Which is my favorite Great Lake? I've never really thought about that, but I would go with Michigan. Yeah, that's why. Why? Well, I like the west side of the state. I love, I actually even like Chicago. I like going on the other side of the Wisconsin, really all the way around, all the way up to Sleeping Bear. That ride going out there, it is beautiful. I like that. Now, truth be told, I haven't spent much time with Lake Superior. I went up to the UP once, and it was pretty wild. Up northern Michigan. My brother went to Northern. He took us out there, but the great Gitchagumi, but I would go with Michigan. The Tribe is saying the Buckeyes are going back to back, and y'all know it. Yeah, I'm not convinced that Ohio State's going to beat Michigan, Tribe. So they might be going back to back in terms of losing to Michigan. I got this one for you, Tribe. I think it's more likely that Michigan beats Ohio State for the 5th time in a row than it is that Ohio State wins back-to-back national championships. How about that, Tribe? 23 Tails is ready to put the house on Michigan. They will cover. Maryland is not as fundamentally sound as Northwestern. You know, if Northwestern, you stripped off the goofy purple uniforms and everything, that was a hard hitting. I mean, they were sledgehammering some of those guys, Carmine Ragu or whatever that guy's name was. I mean, he was a Bastone. These guys were laying the lumber. That was a fierce, hard hitting game. So what you're saying about Northwestern, I don't know about the fundamental part, but the hitting from Northwestern, I was impressed about. That's it. Michigan looked worse versus Purdue and Northwestern in wins than any game last year, not feeling good with no Haynes. And maybe no Marshall. Wait a second. Michigan looked worse versus Penn State and Northwestern in wins than any game last year. Worse. Well, 5 turnovers makes you look bad. I get that part. But I thought that the Illinois game last year, where Jack Tuttle came in and was throwing a pick and then a fumble and then Donovan Edwards fumbled, that was a miserable game. Michigan scored 7 points. Are you saying in Michigan wins, these 2 Michigan wins were better than any of the wins? Because I don't know, Michigan beat Arkansas State last year, but I remember that was pretty ugly. Davis Warren threw 3 picks in that game. It was pretty obvious that Michigan didn't have a quarterback. So they won that game. They beat USC, and they threw for 32 yards. And Alex Orji's first start, that was a miracle victory. 27-24. So I'm not going to agree with that one. They beat Minnesota and had to hang on. Alex Orji with less than 100 yards in that game. A little different. I think Rod Moore played. Didn't Rod Moore play last game? I remember reading something that, and I should know this, but it felt like that he played out. Yeah, he was out. He must have been talking about him on the sideline. Yeah, I think there's a 50-50 shot that he's in there. Paul says, does the current playoff selection system encourage piling on points? Yes. Yes, it does. I mean, you have the human element, and getting an extra 1 or 2 touchdowns is. You tell me Heather Dinich sits around watching all the games? I don't know if Heather Dinich ever watches, doesn't watch any football games. She just sits there on her computer and looks at the strength of schedule. I think Paul Feinbaum watches Michigan play or anything. It's the one thing about, it's kind of a ruse with all people that are that cover even college football. There's some. In particular, I would say a lot of people that are charged or take on the responsibility of voting in the top 25. They do a lot of the homework and they're looking at scores, watching all the highlights and everything else. But if you cover a team, let's say like Michigan, I go to the Michigan home games. It's hard to watch. For instance, when let's wait, what was the Michigan played? Purdue. Well, I was leaving for the game during the during the 3:30 games. You're not able to watch all of those. I was able to watch Michigan State in their game at Minnesota because it was on TV. But the point is that a lot of these guys aren't watching any games. You know what they're doing? They're looking at a couple highlights and they're looking at the score. And then I think the computer, people could correct me looking through that, but yeah, a score that, if you're up 24-7 and you win 31-7, or you're able to even tack on another one, 30, this looks a lot different. So yeah. Without Haynes, he's mentioning Zavada. I didn't know he was hurt. Do we even have one player better than what OSU will field position by position? Yeah, well, sure. I think so. Want to say where? Oh, Derek Moore's pretty good. You go to Michigan's best players. OSU have a pass rusher like Derek Moore. I know the Julian Sayin playing in this rivalry for the first time. It wouldn't be a complete shocker to me. I'm not predicting this, but the quarterback position, Mark. Underwood could play better than Sayin. Sayin on the road the first time in this rivalry, Underwood at home. That wouldn't be a huge shocker to me. Mars looking ahead. He's going to the OSU game. Which is good. It would be a disaster. Send them to me. Does anyone know Steve Kasula's role on the offense? Isn't he the co-offensive coordinator? Does he have that? He's the tight end coach, but he got something. Is a passing game coordinator? I don't think he's not the co-offensive coordinator. I think. 8 Train is saying Chip Lindsey is running that predictable offense. And it wasn't very predictable last game. It's just it ended up being a turnover fest. In fact, from what I had seen against Purdue and Michigan State, and really the entire year, what I had seen from Bryce Underwood throwing the ball in the middle of the field, or staying in the pocket, they looked like they worked on a lot during the bye week, and they started throwing the ball to the middle of the field, and it was very effective. And then he got over his skate, and then he got then it was. He thought he maybe had it solved or whatever. I think even Sharon said it was a heat check on one of the picks. And, then he turned it over 3 times. Air Force One. They've got everything you need there. Blue cheese and sugar cane cartel cokes. Yeah, those were the days. Mark's got a couple more things before we get to basketball. He says it feels like Sharon was an elite O-line coach. Maybe topped out there. The O has felt like Harbaugh was the OC and McDonald and Minter ran the D based on the John Harbaugh mold. The O and the D culture don't feel the same. Well, so you're going to you'll give Minter and McDonald the credit for running John Harbaugh's defense, but it was actually Wink who was the creator of the defense. So I don't know about that. Now, look, McDonald and Minter did a better job. They had better, than Wink. But Wink is, I think, getting undersold by a lot of Michigan fans. So, Mark, I think it's not preposterous what you're saying or anything, but I think you're short selling Wink a little bit. I also think you're short selling Sharon. I mean, Sharon not only was the offensive coordinator, he had to coach 3 freaking games during the national championship season. So this part about him just being an elite O-line coach is shortchanging him. He did a fabulous job as the OC, whether he was running Harbaugh's system or not. He was able to beat Ohio State as the head coach, and he beat Ohio State twice. I give him a little bit of credit there. Look, I'm not on the side of, Sharon, why is everybody on him? There's reasons to look at some of the stuff that he's putting out there. You don't run a reverse when you give up 4 sacks. I think it's a fair critique. You think Ohio State will pass nonstop like everyone thinks or try to run it? The rushing winner usually wins. Well, I don't know, Dave. You shouldn't have been, slamming into the Michigan front like he did last year. I know a lot of the tape guys and play. That's not what happened, but that's what it looked like happened to the everyone else. It looked like Day has rabbit ears when it comes to Michigan, and everyone's saying that he's soft and he's finesse, and that Michigan is out toughed him. And he said, "Well, I'm going to show them." And so I think there's still some of that. I think Day freaks out in this game. So it was one of the things that I'll put advantage Michigan when it comes to the coaches in this game. Moore's 2-0 in this game as a head coach, and Day is a nut job. He's got a lot of John Cooper in him when it comes down to this game. He's scared, and Michigan's in his head. So anybody's guess. So yeah, I think that he's going to do some stupid things. It still might be enough to win, but I think he'll do some dumb things. I think he'll play ultra conservative, and I think he'll do some stupid things that he would not do if it wasn't Michigan. There's a huge gap between Harbaugh and Moore. Team isn't playing well in any face. Yeah, there is a huge gap between Harbaugh and Moore. Harbaugh is one of the greatest coaches ever, and Moore is in his second year. So, yeah, it's true. They aren't playing well in any phase. Well, they're not playing well special teams. The offense, yeah, I think the defense is playing well. That's it. Mark says Harbaugh was a gift from the football gods and we wasted him. Yeah, I don't think Michigan wasted Harbaugh. They won a championship with him. And they had that 3-year run with him. Great 3-year run. I'll agree he was a gift. He's great. But that's it. Flint says he looks lost on the sideline, but I'm willing to give him one more year. Yeah, I don't know about how somebody looks on the sideline. He needs to win this game coming up on Saturday. I mean, if we're going to sit around having people, it's hard when I'm just reading the feedback. People like criticizing Jerome. So we got a basketball game tonight. If you're somebody that likes Michigan, I'm going to tell you right now, we got the holidays creeping up here. I'm having a Thanksgiving starting on Friday. I like it. Not wait until not a week from Thursday. Friday, Thanksgiving around here. My point here is with the holidays and with Michigan in action all the time on the hardwood, football, playoffs, everything else, it's a great time to join the Maize and Blue Review today. You like Michigan? Of course you do. Put that check mark. It checks all the boxes that you're looking for. And then you want to talk about Michigan all the time with like-minded fans. That's another big check mark. So join up. Go to on3.com/rivals and click the Maize and Blue Review. I guarantee you'll love it. We've got a basketball game coming up for you tonight. Michigan taking on Middle Tennessee. That is a 6:30 start. We will be here on this very channel that you are watching or listening to right now, following the game, talking about Michigan, number 7 in the country. If they are able to move to 4-0, we have the Michigan basketball post-game live for you. Ripstar asking if Trey McKinney is a diaper dandy. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing right now. Yeah, he's a diaper dandy. And he lit it up, and he looks pretty good. I think that he has been outstanding so far. Yeah, I like Trey McKinney. Definitely a diaper dandy. That's it. Mark's talking about losing Harbaugh as much as MSU losing Saban. Look, here's the hard part, Mark. I get where you're coming from and everything else, but when you lose a great coach and you have to follow a legend, it is very difficult for almost all teams. I know for some reason, Ohio State and Day, who I don't think is all that great of a coach, he has been able to not only continue the success from Meyer and that they've had this continuity of, they just continue to recruit great. First they were, paying for the players where it was illegal and they were getting them. Now they're paying above board and they're still getting them. And even though he might not be the greatest coach, he won the championship. So, but mostly it's really hard to follow a legend and those guys are worth their weight in gold. You get somebody like Saban, you get somebody like Harbaugh. And the truth is that whoever you were going to put in there, maybe it was you thought there should have been, going and got, Caleb DeBoer or whatever else. It was going to be hard, but I don't look at that part. I look at Michigan's got the resources and they should be able to do it and they can do it. But how many teams are able to do that? Follow up with one of the great coaches and then keep it going. Not many. So there is that part. So that's it. Gift your loved ones the Maize and Blue Review today. Your wife and children will love you more for it. That's it. That's it. And that is with the basketball game coming up tonight. I'll be watching it. I'll be here. I hope you join us. Thanks so much for taking part in today's show. Here's the Reader's Digest of today's show. 2 freshman quarterback will collide at 4 o'clock on Saturday in a must-win game for Michigan in College Park, Maryland. With a win, Michigan sets up a special week against Ohio State where if they were able to win that game, it would be a bigger victory than it was last year, and it would vault Michigan not only into the college football playoff discussion, but it would put Michigan into the college football playoff. And then we have a basketball game That's coming up tonight, 6:30. So around before 9, we'll be back here talking hoops tonight. Thanks so much. Have a great day. We'll talk with you after the basketball game tonight. 4 over on the Maize and Blue Review.